She left her marriage the same night. She found out she was pregnant after catching her billionaire CEO husband with her mom. How long? Cordelia's voice shattered the stunned silence, her hands trembling as she clutched the doorframe. The pregnancy test she'd been so excited to share still tucked in her purse. How long have you been sleeping with my mother? Reed didn't even have the decency to look ashamed as he stood from the bed, casually reaching for his discarded shirt. Cordelia, you're being dramatic. This isn't what it looks like. From the tangled sheets, Evelyn finally found her voice. Sweetheart, please. We never meant to hurt you. It just happened. Just happened. Cordelia's laugh was hollow, unrecognizable even to her own ears. My husband and my mother just happened to end up naked in my bed. The bed where we've been trying for a baby for 2 years. Reed's expression hardened, that familiar CEO mask sliding into place. Your mother has been lonely since your father died. We connected. It's complicated. Complicated. Tears streamed down Cordelia's face as she backed away. I'm pregnant with your child, Reed. I found out today. That's what I rushed home to tell you. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, Cordelia knew her life would never be the same again. Have you ever had your entire world collapse in a single heartbeat? That moment when betrayal cuts so deep it severs everything you thought was real? Today's story explores that very nightmare. When a woman discovers her husband and mother's ultimate betrayal on the same day, she learns she's carrying a child. If you've ever wondered how someone rebuilds after losing everything they trusted, stay with me for this powerful journey of heartbreak, survival, and unexpected strength. The pregnancy test had turned positive in an airport bathroom 3 hours earlier. Cordelia Hayes Maxwell had been washing her hands when she'd glanced at the test sitting on the edge of the sink, almost dropping her phone when she saw the 2 pink lines that had eluded her for so long. After 2 years of trying specialized fertility diets, tracking apps, and discussions about potential treatments, it had happened naturally during the 1 month they decided to take a break from the pressure. Oh my God, she whispered, picking up the test with trembling fingers. She'd only taken it as a formality before her business trip, never expecting a positive result. Now, standing in the sterile airport bathroom, with travelers moving around her, Cordelia felt her entire future shifting into place. Reed would be ecstatic. Her brilliant, driven husband had been talking about children since their second date, a dynasty, he'd called it. The Maxwell legacy continued through their children. Despite his demanding role as CEO of Maxwell Technologies, he'd promised to be a present father, different from his own distant dad. Cordelia abandoned her business trip on the spot, calling her assistant from the terminal to reschedule her meetings. This news couldn't wait. She wanted to see Reed's face when she told him, wanted to share this moment in person rather than over the phone. The drive from the airport to their Palisades estate took nearly an hour in midday traffic, but Cordelia barely noticed. Her mind raced with possibilities, nursery designs, name ideas, whether they'd have a boy with Reed's sharp green eyes or a girl with her curly dark hair. We're having a baby, she said aloud to herself, testing the words, a smile spreading across her face. Her hand drifted to her still flat stomach. Hello in there. We've been waiting for you. As she pulled through the security gates of their estate, Cordelia felt a flutter of excitement. Reed worked from home on Tuesdays, their attempt to maintain connection despite his crushing schedule. It was perfect timing. Perhaps they could celebrate over lunch, maybe call her mother later to share the news. Her mother, Evelyn, would be overjoyed. Since Cordelia's father died 5 years ago, Evelyn had been subtly hinting about grandchildren. She'd been a rock for Cordelia during the difficult fertility journey, always offering support and never pushing too hard despite her obvious desire for a grandchild. Cordelia parked her car and grabbed her purse, checking her reflection quickly in the rearview mirror. She dressed carefully that morning for her business meetings, a tailored navy dress that accentuated her slender frame, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional Cordelia, medical research director. Now she was switching roles to expectant mother, and the transformation made her giddy. The house was quiet as she entered through the front door, which was unusual. Normally Reed's video calls echoed through the vaulted ceilings, or their housekeeper would be running the vacuum. Today, there was just silence. Reed? She called out, setting her purse on the entryway table. Are you home? I have amazing news. No response. Perhaps he was in his soundproofed office at the back of the house. Cordelia made her way through the living room, noticing a woman's jacket draped over one of the chairs. Her mother's jacket. That wasn't entirely unusual. Evelyn lived just 20 minutes away and often stopped by, especially on Tuesdays when she knew Reed worked from home. They'd grown close over the years, which pleased Cordelia. Her family unit was tight-knit, supportive. Perfect, Cordelia thought. They could tell her mother together. As she approached the master bedroom, she heard voices, low murmurs, then her mother's distinctive laugh, the one that always reminded Cordelia of wind chimes. Cordelia smiled, reaching for the door handle. Then she paused. Something about the quality of the laughter made her hesitate. It wasn't Evelyn's usual laugh. This one was breathier, intimate in a way that triggered an instinctive alarm in Cordelia's mind. She pushed the door open slowly, silently. The sight that greeted her would be forever burned into her memory. Reed's naked back, her mother's manicured hands gripping his shoulders, both of them so engrossed in each other they didn't notice her standing in the doorway. The world tilted sideways. Cordelia must have made a sound, a gasp, a sob, because suddenly they were both looking at her, frozen in their betrayal. What followed was the confrontation that would end her marriage, her relationship with her mother, and the life she had carefully built over the past 3 years. But in that initial moment of discovery, all Cordelia could think about was the child growing inside her, a child who would be born into a family shattered by the two people who should have protected it most. "Your mother and I have been seeing each other for almost a year," Reed finally admitted after Cordelia's initial outburst, his voice clinical, as if discussing a business merger rather than the destruction of their marriage. "It started after the charity gala last spring. We never planned it." "A year?" Cordelia's voice cracked. "While I was taking fertility supplements and tracking my cycle and crying every month when my period came, you were sleeping with my mother?" Evelyn was sobbing now, clutching the sheet to her chest, her normally perfect makeup streaking down her face. "Cordelia, please. You don't understand. I've been so lonely since your father died, and Reed was there for me when you were busy with your research position." "Don't you dare," Cordelia said, her voice dropping dangerously low. "Don't you dare make this my fault." "No one's saying it's your fault," Reed said, now fully dressed, his composure regained. "But let's be realistic. Our marriage hasn't been perfect. You've been distant, focused on your career. Because you encouraged me to be." Cordelia shot back. "You said we were partners, that my research was important. Was that all a lie while you were what? Grooming my mother as my replacement?" "That's not fair," Evelyn interjected, now wrapping herself in Cordelia's robe, the final indignity. "Reed and I connected on a deeper level. We didn't mean for it to happen." Cordelia laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "A deeper level? He's my husband, mother. We were planning a family." Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. "I'm carrying his child." The room went silent. Reed's eyes widened, his gaze dropping to her midsection. "You're pregnant?" he asked, taking a step toward her. "Are you sure?" "Don't." Cordelia backed away. "Don't you dare act like you care now." "Of course I care." Reed's voice softened in a way that once would have melted her resolve. "This changes everything. We need to talk about this rationally, figure out." "Figure out what?" Cordelia interrupted. "How to explain to our child that Daddy likes to sleep with Grandma. How to co-parent while you two continue whatever sick relationship this is." "Cordelia, please." Evelyn was fully crying now, her voice thick with tears. "We can work through this. As a family." "Family." The word tasted like poison on Cordelia's tongue. "You destroyed our family. Both of you." She turned to leave, her mind made up in that instant though she hadn't consciously formed a plan. "Where are you going?" Reed called after her. "We need to discuss this like adults." Cordelia turned back one last time, memorizing the scene, her husband and mother, the architects of her destruction, standing in the bedroom she'd lovingly decorated when they bought this house. The room where she'd hoped to raise their children, to build their future. "I'm leaving," she said simply, "and neither of you will ever see me or my child again." When the two people who should love you most commit the ultimate betrayal, where do you turn? Cordelia's world collapsed in an instant, but her story was just beginning. Stay with me to discover how one woman found the strength to walk away from everything she knew to protect the child growing inside her. Cordelia didn't remember the drive to Margot's apartment. Later, she would recall flashes, running a red light, nearly sideswiping a delivery truck, sobbing so hard at one point that she had to pull over until the shaking subsided. But the journey itself was lost to the fog of trauma that had descended the moment she'd opened that bedroom door. Margot Whitfield had been Cordelia's best friend since medical school. While Cordelia had veered toward research, Margot had pursued emergency medicine, developing the unflappable calm of someone who regularly dealt with life-or-death situations. That calm was exactly what Cordelia needed as she pounded on Margot's door, mascara streaking her face, barely able to form coherent sentences. "Whoa, COR, breathe," Margot said, pulling her inside the modest apartment. "Sit down before you fall down." "What happened?" "Read, my mother." Cordelia managed between gasping sobs. Margot's brow furrowed. "Your mother? Is she okay? Did something happen to Evelyn?" "She's sleeping with Reed," Cordelia finally blurted out. "I caught them. In our bed." Margot's expression shifted from concern to shock to rage in the span of seconds. "What? Your mother and Reed? That's... Jesus, Cor." "It gets worse," Cordelia said, her hand going to her stomach in what was already becoming a protective gesture. "I'm pregnant. I found out today." "Oh my God," Margot whispered, sitting heavily beside Cordelia on the sofa. "Tell me everything." The story spilled out in disjointed pieces: the positive pregnancy test, the excitement, the devastating discovery, the confrontation. Margot listened without interrupting, only getting up once to bring Cordelia a glass of water and a box of tissues. "A year," Cordelia concluded, her voice now hollow from crying. "They've been having an affair for a year while I've been trying to get pregnant, while my mother has been giving me fertility advice and holding me when I cried each month." "That's..." Margot seemed at a loss for words, which was unusual for the typically articulate doctor. "I don't even know what to say. It's beyond betrayal." "What do I do now?" Cordelia asked, suddenly feeling very small and lost. "I told them I was leaving, but I didn't think beyond that moment. Where do I go? How do I..." Her voice broke. "How do I have this baby alone?" "First of all, you're not alone," Margot said firmly, taking Cordelia's hands in hers. "You have me. Always. You can stay here as long as you need to figure things out. Reed will come looking for me," Cordelia said, "especially now that he knows about the baby. He's always talked about heirs, about the Maxwell legacy. He won't let me just disappear with his child." "Let me worry about that," Margot said, a steely determination in her voice. "Right now, you need to rest. You're in shock, and stress isn't good for the baby. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." Cordelia nodded, suddenly exhausted to her bones. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," Margot promised, pulling her friend into a tight hug. "Now, let me make up the guest room. Tomorrow we start building your new life." That night, Cordelia slept fitfully, waking from nightmares where she was searching for her baby in an empty house, while Reed and Evelyn laughed from behind locked doors. By morning, her momentary collapse had been replaced by a cold, clear resolve. She had a child to protect now. Every decision from this point forward would be made with that single priority in mind. Over coffee, herbal tea for Cordelia, they began to form a plan. "First things first," Margot said, pulling out a notepad in full doctor mode. "Finances. What's your situation?" "Complicated," Cordelia sighed. "Reed insisted we merge everything when we married. Joint accounts, joint investments. My salary from the Research Institute goes into our shared account. And your name is on the house? The cars. Everything is in both our names. But Reed's family money is what purchased most of it. And there's a prenup," Cordelia added. "It's actually quite fair. I get a percentage based on years married. But it would take months to fight for it. And I'd have to stay in contact with him." "What about your personal accounts from before the marriage? Did you close everything?" Cordelia thought for a moment. "Not everything. I have an old savings account from medical school. Reed wanted me to close it, but I kept it for sentimental reasons. It probably has about 10,000 in it." "That's a start," Margot nodded. "What about your mother? Does she have access to your accounts?" "No, but..." Cordelia trailed off, a new realization dawning. "I've been supporting her since Dad died. The monthly transfers to cover her mortgage, her living expenses, it all comes from our joint account. She's financially dependent on us. On Reed now, I suppose. Which gives her a strong motivation to side with him," Margot concluded grimly. "Okay, we need to move fast before either of them freezes you out." I can lend you some cash to get started somewhere new. I can't take your money, Cordelia protested. You're not taking it. I'm offering it. And you'll pay me back when you're back on your feet, Margot countered. Now, what about your job? Can you work remotely? Possibly. Dr. Winters has been pushing for more flexible arrangements for the research team. I could request a transfer to another facility or ask for remote status, at least temporarily. Good. Do that today, but be vague about why. Just say you're dealing with a family emergency. Margot tapped her pen against the notepad. The big question is, where do you go? Reed has resources, Cordelia. If he wants to find you, especially with his child, he'll hire investigators. Cordelia felt a chill run through her. Reed was methodical, relentless when he wanted something. And he'd always been crystal clear about wanting children, preferably sons, to carry on the Maxwell name and legacy. I need to disappear completely, she said slowly. Somewhere neither of them would think to look. Margot was quiet for a moment, thinking, what about Ellis Morgan? Ellis? From our trauma rotation. Cordelia hadn't thought about their former classmate in years. She's running a small community health clinic in Port Townsend, up in Washington. Remember how she was always talking about the beauty of the Olympic Peninsula? It's remote but not isolated, small enough to know your neighbors, but not so small you'd stand out too much. Would she help me? We weren't exactly close. Ellis has a soft spot for pregnant women in crisis. Her sister was in an abusive marriage, had to flee with her kids. It's why she chose to work where she did. The clinic serves a lot of women in difficult situations. Cordelia considered it. Washington was far from the luxury estates of Los Angeles where Reed ruled his tech empire. A small coastal town where nobody knew the Maxwell name or would recognize her face from charity gala photos. I'll need a new identity, she said, the reality of what she was planning sinking in. Not legally, I can't risk fraud charges, but a new name to use, a cover story. Your maiden name is a start. You're Cordelia Hayes again, not Maxwell. And you're a widow, Margot suggested. It explains the pregnancy, the absence of a partner, and discourages too many personal questions. A widow, Cordelia repeated, testing the word. It wasn't entirely inaccurate. She was mourning the death of her marriage, her relationship with her mother, the life she'd thought she had. I'll call Ellis today, Margot said. Now, what do you need from your house? We should get your essential documents and personal items before Reed realizes what you're planning. He has meetings all day, Cordelia said, checking her watch. And my mother. She stumbled over the word. The betrayal's still raw. She never stays overnight. She'll have gone home by now. Then we go now, Margot said decisively. Pack only what you absolutely need. Documents, irreplaceable personal items, enough clothes to get by until you're settled. For hours later, Cordelia stood in her walk-in closet for what she knew would be the last time, methodically selecting items while Margot kept watch downstairs. She'd already retrieved her passport, birth certificate, and medical records from the home office safe. Her grandmother's jewelry, hidden in a velvet pouch at the back of her dresser drawer, was tucked safely in her bag. Now she was facing the harder choices, what pieces of her old life to take into her new one. In the end, she selected practical items rather than the designer pieces Reed had bought her. Comfortable clothes suitable for a growing pregnancy, a few cherished photos from before her marriage, carefully removing any featuring her mother, her favorite medical textbooks, and the quilt her grandmother had made her for college graduation. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. As she zipped the final bag, her phone rang. Reed's face flashed on the screen, his first attempt to contact her since she'd fled the house yesterday. Cordelia silenced it, but moments later it rang again. And again. Finally, she answered, putting it on speaker so Margot could hear from the doorway. Where are you? Reed's voice was controlled, but with an undercurrent of anger. We need to talk about this rationally, Cordelia. There's nothing to talk about, she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. You're carrying my child, he said, as if that explained everything. Of course we need to talk. Whatever issues we have in our marriage, we can work through them. For the baby's sake. Issues in our marriage. Cordelia repeated incredulously. You've been sleeping with my mother for a year. That's not an issue, Reed. That's a complete betrayal of everything our marriage was supposed to be. People make mistakes, he said, his tone shifting to the persuasive cadence he used in business negotiations. Your mother and I got caught up in something neither of us intended. But that doesn't change the fact that we're having a baby together, Cordelia. My child deserves the Maxwell name, the opportunities that come with it. My child deserves a mother who respects herself enough not to stay with a man who could do something so vile, Cordelia countered, and deserves to be kept far away from a grandmother who would betray her own daughter. Don't be dramatic, Reed's voice hardened. Where are you? We should discuss this in person. I'm done discussing anything with you, Cordelia said. I'll have my lawyer contact you about divorce proceedings. Divorce? Reed actually laughed. Cordelia, be realistic. You're 3 years into a marriage with an ironclad prenup. You're pregnant with a Maxwell heir. Do you really think I'm going to let you just walk away? The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Margot made a slashing motion across her throat in the call. Goodbye, Reed, Cordelia said, and hung up. Immediately, her phone began ringing again. She turned it off completely. We need to move fast, Margot said. He's going to start tracking you. I know. Cordelia took one final look around the bedroom she'd shared with Reed, the life she was leaving behind. I'm ready. They took Margot's car rather than Cordelia's luxury SUV, which Reed could easily track through its built-in GPS system. As they pulled away from the estate, Cordelia didn't look back. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, her focus entirely on the future growing inside her. I just heard from Ellis, Margot said as they drove toward her apartment. She can help. She's got a furnished rental cabin that just opened up. It belongs to the clinic. They use it for visiting specialists. It's yours for as long as you need it. I don't know how to thank you, Cordelia said, tears threatening again. Both of you. Just take care of yourself and that baby, Margot replied. And maybe name it after me if it's a girl, she added with a wry smile, trying to lighten the moment. Cordelia managed a small laugh. Margot Hayes. It has a nice ring to it. Hayes, Margot nodded approvingly. It suits you. I never liked Maxwell anyway, too pretentious. As they continued planning her escape, Cordelia felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos of the past 24 hours. Her old life had been shattered beyond repair, but from the wreckage, something new was taking shape, a life defined by her own choices rather than Reed's expectations or her mother's influence. For the first time since she'd seen that positive pregnancy test, she felt a flutter of genuine hope. This child would not be a Maxwell heir, groomed to continue Reed's legacy. This child would be hers, raised with love and honesty in a home without betrayal. I'm going to be okay, she said softly, more to herself than to Margot. Yes, Margot agreed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. You are. Better than okay. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations are born from our darkest moments. Cordelia's world had been destroyed in an instant, but from those ashes, she was about to build something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. The drive to Port Townsend took 3 days. Cordelia left her credit cards, her phone, and every traceable connection to her old life behind. Margot had withdrawn enough cash to get her started and purchased a basic prepaid phone with no smart capabilities that Reed couldn't hack. They'd agreed that all communication would go through Ellis initially, until they were certain Reed wasn't monitoring Margot's devices. Ellis Morgan met them at the clinic after hours, her warm embrace making Cordelia realize how touch-starved she already felt after just 3 days on the run. The practical doctor had already prepared the cabin, stocked it with groceries, and arranged for Cordelia to undergo a complete prenatal workup the next morning. Thank you for this, Cordelia said as Ellis drove them to the cabin, tucked into a wooded area just outside town. I know we weren't close in medical school. Stop, Ellis interrupted gently. Any friend of Margot's is a friend of mine, and any pregnant woman fleeing a toxic situation deserves help, medical school connection or not. The cabin was small but cozy, 1 bedroom, an open living area with a kitchen nook and a surprisingly spacious bathroom. Windows looked out on towering pines, and in the distance, Cordelia could just make out a sliver of ocean between the trees. It's perfect, she said, feeling the tension in her shoulders release slightly for the first time in days. It's yours for as long as you need it, Ellis assured her. The clinic owns it, but we only use it when specialists visit, which is every few months. You'll have plenty of warning if we need to relocate you temporarily. I won't impose that long, Cordelia promised. Just until I get on my feet. Ellis gave her a knowing look. Pregnancy and new motherhood is challenging enough without your situation. Don't put arbitrary timelines on your healing. Now, let's get you settled. You must be exhausted. That night, after Ellis and Margot had left, Cordelia stood at the window watching darkness settle over the forest. The events of the past few days felt almost hallucinatory in their intensity. Had it really been only 4 days since she discovered she was pregnant? Since she'd found Reed and her mother together? Since she'd fled the only life she'd known as an adult? This is real, she whispered to herself, her hand resting on her stomach in what was becoming a habitual gesture. This is our life now. For the first time since she'd opened that bedroom door, Cordelia allowed herself to truly feel everything she'd been suppressing in favor of practical action. The rage, the hurt, the grief, the fear. She sank to the floor and sobbed until her throat was raw and her eyes burned, purging the poison of betrayal from her system. When the tears finally subsided, she felt oddly cleansed. Not healed, that would take much longer, but as if the wound had been properly cleaned, making space for recovery to begin. I promise you this, she said to her unborn child, her voice steady despite her tear-stained face. You will never know betrayal from me. You will always be able to trust that I put you first, and you will grow up surrounded by genuine love, not the counterfeit version I accepted for too long. The next morning, Cordelia began building their new life in earnest. Ellis's clinic confirmed her pregnancy, approximately 6 weeks along, healthy development so far. The staff, briefed on the basics of her situation without specifics, treated her with a gentle efficiency that soothed her frayed nerves. We should discuss your work situation, Ellis said over lunch in her office afterward. Margot mentioned you're in medical research. Yes, focused on autoimmune treatments, Cordelia confirmed. I've been with the Westridge Institute in LA for the past 4 years. I was actually up for department head before. She trailed off. Before everything imploded, Ellis finished for her. Have you spoken with them? I sent an email from a new account yesterday, requesting emergency family leave. I was vague about the details, just said I was dealing with a personal crisis and needed time. And Dr. Winters, my supervisor, responded almost immediately. He's approved 6 weeks of leave, no questions asked. He's always been supportive. That's a good start, Ellis nodded. But what about after those 6 weeks? Cordelia sighed. I'm not sure. I love my work, and I've built a reputation in my field. Starting over completely would mean sacrificing years of research and connections. You don't necessarily have to start over, Ellis mused. Medical research can often be done remotely, especially data analysis and literature review. And there's a growing trend toward distributed research teams. You think I could continue my work from here? Cordelia asked, hope flickering. It's worth exploring. The isolation that helps you hide from your ex could actually be advantageous for focused research work. Ellis tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. And if you need institutional backing, the clinic has partnerships with several research hospitals. Not as prestigious as Westridge, perhaps, but legitimate. For the first time, Cordelia allowed herself to imagine a future that included both her child and her career. Perhaps she wouldn't have to sacrifice everything from her old life after all. The weeks that followed fell into a surreal routine. By day, Cordelia worked remotely, analyzing data sets and contributing to research papers using only her maiden name, Hayes. Dr. Winters had been surprisingly accommodating once she'd explained she needed to remain in Washington for family reasons, even arranging for her to consult on projects at a Seattle research hospital that partnered with Westridge. By night, she prepared for the baby, reading everything she could find about pregnancy and childbirth, connecting with the small community of expectant mothers in Ellis's prenatal program, and slowly allowing herself to feel excitement about the life growing inside her. She cut her hair short, a practical decision to ease maintenance, but also a symbolic severing from her old self. The long, carefully styled locks Reed had admired were replaced by a simple, chin-length cut that framed her face and required minimal effort. She traded designer clothes for comfortable, practical pieces from local shops. Her wedding ring went into a small box at the back of a drawer, along with her diamond earrings and the pearl necklace Reed had given her for their first anniversary. As her first trimester progressed, Cordelia established a small circle of trusted allies. Ellis, of course, who monitored her pregnancy and offered both medical and emotional support. Georgia, the clinic's receptionist, who invited Cordelia to her book club, introducing her as Corey Hayes, a medical researcher staying in town for a project. Samuel, the elderly neighbor whose wife had recently passed, who insisted on bringing her fresh vegetables from his garden and checking that her cabin was properly heated as autumn turned the peninsula's weather crisp and cool. None of them knew the full story, but all sensed she was healing from something significant and respected her privacy while offering gentle friendship. 6 weeks into her self-imposed exile, just as her clinic-mandated leave was ending, the first complication arose. She was reviewing research proposals at the small desk in her cabin when her new email pinged with a message from Dr. Winters. "Cordelia, I've received a concerning call from Reed Maxwell. He claims you've gone missing and may be experiencing a mental health crisis. He asked for information about your whereabouts, citing concern about your pregnancy. I told him I couldn't discuss personnel matters, but advised him that you're on approved leave and in regular contact with the Institute. Wanted to warn you that he's actively searching. Take care, Charles Winters." Cordelia's heart raced as she read the message twice. Reed was looking for her, using her pregnancy as leverage, and he'd contacted her workplace, which meant he was being thorough in his search. With shaking hands, she forwarded the email to Ellis, adding, "Reed is actively searching. He knows about the pregnancy and is using it to justify his concern. Please warn Margot." Ellis responded within minutes, "Come to the clinic. Now, we need to talk." An hour later, Cordelia sat in Ellis's office with the doctor and Samuel, who, it turned out, was a retired attorney specializing in family law. "We need to get ahead of this," Samuel said, his weathered face serious. "If your ex-husband is as wealthy and connected as you've indicated, he has resources to find you. And using concern about your pregnancy and mental health is a clever tactic. It makes him look like a caring husband rather than a controlling ex." "What do I do?" Cordelia asked, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, now showing the first subtle curves of her pregnancy at 12 weeks. "First, we establish legal boundaries," Samuel said. "I can help you file for divorce remotely, through an attorney in California who won't disclose your location. We cite irreconcilable differences, maybe even adultery if you're willing to make that public." "I don't care if it's public," Cordelia said firmly. "But I don't want to use my mother's name specifically. That's complicated." "Understandable," Samuel nodded. "The filing itself will give you some protection. It establishes that you left the marriage voluntarily and are of sound mind, countering any narrative he's building about your mental state." "What about the baby?" Ellis asked the question Cordelia was dreading. "In most states, he'll have legal rights as the father." "That's trickier," Samuel admitted. "Without a court-established custody arrangement, either parent technically has equal rights to the child after birth. But before birth, the mother's rights generally prevail, especially regarding medical decisions and privacy. So he can't force me to return before the baby is born?" Cordelia clarified. "It would be extremely difficult for him to do so legally," Samuel confirmed. "But after birth, he could file for custody or visitation, especially if he can prove paternity, which he can easily do with a DNA test," Cordelia sighed. "So eventually I'll have to deal with him." "Eventually," Ellis emphasized. "But right now, your priority is maintaining a safe, stress-free pregnancy. Legal battles can wait until you're physically and emotionally stronger." Samuel patted Cordelia's hand gently. "I have colleagues in California who specialize in high-conflict divorces involving wealthy individuals. They know how to protect their clients' privacy while navigating the legal system. Let me make some calls." As they continued discussing strategies, Cordelia felt the baby flutter inside her for the first time, a sensation like butterfly wings, so subtle she might have missed it if she hadn't been sitting still. Her hand flew to her belly, her eyes widening. "What is it?" Ellis asked, noticing the gesture. "Are you feeling unwell?" "No," Cordelia said, a smile breaking through her worry. "I just felt the baby move. For the first time." Ellis's face softened. "That's earlier than many first-time mothers notice. You must be very in tune with your body. Or the baby is trying to remind me what matters most," Cordelia said, the tiny movement centering her amid the chaos of planning. "Whatever happens with Reed, with the divorce, with everything, this child comes first. All my decisions need to protect this baby first and foremost." "That's the right priority," Samuel agreed. "And knowing that clarity of purpose will help guide us through the legal complexities ahead." By the time she returned to her cabin that evening, A plan was taking shape. Samuel would connect her with a California attorney who would file for divorce on grounds of adultery, without specifically naming Evelyn. The attorney would establish a secure communication channel for legal proceedings that couldn't be traced back to Washington. Ellis would document Cordelia's pregnancy and mental state, creating medical records that countered any claim of instability Reed might make. And Cordelia would continue building her new life one day at a time, focusing on her health, her work, and preparing for her child's arrival. That night, she wrote in the journal she'd started keeping for her baby, "I felt you move today, little one. Just the faintest flutter, like a whisper only I could hear." In that moment, everything became clearer. The path ahead is complicated, with legal and emotional hurdles I never anticipated facing alone. But I'm not really alone, am I? I have you. And somehow, knowing you're growing stronger each day gives me the strength to face whatever comes next. We're a team already, you and I. And together, we're going to build a life filled with honesty, trust, and genuine love. Everything I thought I had before, but we'll make sure you truly have always. When protecting your child means exposing your deepest wounds, what would you sacrifice for their future? Cordelia was about to discover just how far a mother would go to shield her child from toxic influences, even if it meant confronting the powerful man she once loved. The weeks following her first feeling of the baby's movement brought a flurry of legal activity that Cordelia navigated from the safety of her remote cabin. Samuel's contacts had connected her with Juliana Perkins, a formidable divorce attorney in Los Angeles who specialized in high-profile separations with significant power imbalances. "He's already filed a motion requesting your medical records," Juliana informed Cordelia during one of their secure video calls, "claiming concern about your mental state and the health of his heir, as he keeps referring to the baby." "Can he get them?" Cordelia asked, a protective hand on her growing belly. "Not without your consent or a court order, which he doesn't have grounds for yet," Juliana assured her. "We've counterfiled with Ellis's assessment of your excellent mental health and normal pregnancy progression. The judge seems skeptical of his sudden concern, given that you've been gone for nearly 3 months. 3 months, Cordelia repeated softly. The time had passed in a blur of work, prenatal appointments, and slowly building a life in Port Townsend. Her small cabin now felt like home, with second-hand furniture she'd carefully selected, botanical prints she'd framed for the walls, and a corner of the bedroom beginning to transform into a nursery space. "Has he said anything about my mother?" Cordelia asked, the question still painful to voice even after months of separation. Juliana hesitated. "They're still together, at least publicly. She's been photographed at several events as his +1. The press is describing her as a family friend, supporting him through your mysterious absence." Cordelia laughed bitterly. "Family friend. That's one way to put it. We could use their relationship in court," Juliana suggested. "It strengthens our adultery claims significantly." "No," Cordelia said firmly. "I don't want her named specifically in the divorce. Not to protect her, but because I don't want that connection in public records my child might someday access. Let's stick with adultery with an unnamed partner." "As you wish," Juliana nodded. "But you should know that Reed is painting a very different picture. His filing describes you as unstable, claiming you had delusional episodes before disappearing. He's suggesting you invented the adultery as part of a breakdown." "Of course he is." Cordelia wasn't surprised. Reed never admitted fault or weakness. It was fundamental to his business success and personal failings alike. Do we have enough to counter that narrative? More than enough. Your consistently excellent performance evaluations at work, Dr. Winter's statement about your rational communication during leave, Ellis's current assessment, and the suspicious timing of your departure immediately after discovering your pregnancy. Juliana's tone was confident. No judge is going to buy a story that you suddenly became delusional the same day you learned you were pregnant. The conversation shifted to financial matters. Reed had indeed frozen their joint accounts the day after she left, but Juliana had successfully petitioned for temporary support given Cordelia's pregnancy. The money was being held in a trust account, accessible to Cordelia without revealing her location. "One more thing," Juliana said as they were wrapping up. "He's hired investigators. High-end ones. They've been questioning Dr. Winters, your former colleagues, even the doorman at your building. Be careful about digital footprints, phone calls to old contacts, anything that might create a trail." I am, Cordelia assured her. I'm using secure connections for work, and I haven't contacted anyone from my old life except through encrypted channels Ellis set up. Good. Because Reed Maxwell isn't a man accustomed to losing. Juliana's expression was grave. And from what I can tell, he views you and that baby as possessions he's determined to reclaim. After ending the call, Cordelia sat at her small desk, absently rubbing her expanding belly as she considered Juliana's warning. Reed had always been possessive, though she'd mistaken it for protectiveness during their marriage. The way he'd insisted on joint accounts, on knowing her schedule, on accompanying her to important work functions, she'd interpreted it as interest in her life, not control of it. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Bennett Park, the clinic's new doctor, holding a cloth grocery bag. Ellis sent me with your prenatal vitamins and some fresh bread from the bakery in town, he explained with an apologetic smile. She got called into an emergency delivery. Thanks, Cordelia said, accepting the bag. Would you like to come in for tea? It's getting cold out there. Bennett hesitated only briefly before nodding. Tea would be great, if you're sure I'm not interrupting. At nearly 5 months pregnant, Cordelia had grown used to the kindness of the small community that had embraced her. But Bennett's thoughtfulness went beyond neighborly concern. The young doctor had joined Ellis's clinic just weeks after Cordelia's arrival, relocating from a prestigious hospital in Chicago for reasons he hadn't fully explained. There was a gentleness to him that Cordelia found both comforting and slightly unsettling after Reed's intensity. Just finished a legal call, she explained, putting the kettle on. Nothing urgent. Divorce proceedings still moving forward. Bennett asked, settling at her small kitchen table. Slowly. My ex is fighting every step, using my pregnancy as leverage. She didn't elaborate. Bennett knew only the broad strokes of her situation, not the specifics involving her mother. That must be stressful, Bennett observed, his dark eyes concerned. How's your blood pressure been? Cordelia smiled at the immediate shift to doctor mode. Perfect at my last check. This little one seems remarkably resilient despite everything. She passed him a mug of herbal tea before sitting across from him, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. Babies often are, Bennett agreed, though their mothers should still prioritize rest and minimizing stress. I'm trying, she sighed. Work helps, actually. Focusing on research problems gives my mind a break from the personal ones. I saw your name on that autoimmune therapy paper that just came out in the Journal of Immunology, Bennett mentioned. Impressive work, especially under the circumstances. Cordelia felt a flush of pride. You read it. Of course. Medical immunology was my fellowship focus before I switched to family medicine. He took a sip of tea. The applications for your treatment protocol could be revolutionary for rural populations with limited access to specialists. The conversation shifted into comfortable medical territory, research methodologies, treatment applications, the challenges of implementing new protocols in underserved communities. For an hour, Cordelia felt like her old self, the researcher whose mind had once been her greatest source of pride and identity. I should let you get back to your evening, Bennett said finally, noticing the darkening sky outside. But I enjoyed this. It's refreshing to have someone to discuss immunology research with in our little town. I enjoyed it too, Cordelia admitted. Sometimes I miss the intellectual stimulation of the Research Institute. Video conferences aren't quite the same as impromptu discussions over coffee in the lab. Well, my office door is always open if you need a medical research sounding board, Bennett offered, standing to leave. Or, if you just want company that doesn't revolve around pregnancy and divorce. His kind smile triggered an unexpected flutter in Cordelia's chest, one that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. She quickly dismissed it. The last thing she needed was romantic complications while still legally married and building a new life. I might take you up on that, she said instead, keeping her tone light. The medical research part, at least. After Bennett left, Cordelia stood at the window watching his truck navigate the winding road back toward town, wondering why the simple conversation had left her feeling more centered than she had in weeks. Perhaps it was just the normalcy of it, being seen as Dr. Hayes the researcher rather than Cordelia the pregnant divorcee in hiding. Whatever the reason, the brief respite from her complicated reality was welcome. She placed a hand on her growing belly, feeling a stronger kick than before. Was that a vote of approval, little one? She murmured. Do you like Dr. Park too? The answering flutter made her smile. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, one where she thrived as both mother and researcher, where she might eventually open her heart again to someone worthy of trust. It was a fragile hope, but one she tucked away carefully, a small light against the darkness of legal battles and betrayals still to navigate. 2 weeks later, Cordelia sat in Ellis's office for her 20-week anatomy scan, watching in awe as the ultrasound technician pointed out perfect tiny fingers, a strong spine, and a healthy four-chambered heart. "Would you like to know the sex?" the technician asked, freezing the image on screen. Cordelia hesitated. During her marriage, Reed had been adamant about having a son first, a Maxwell heir to carry on the family name and eventually take over the company. He'd researched gender selection methods, talked about family legacy, made it clear that while daughters would be welcome eventually, a firstborn son was the priority. "Yes," she decided, reclaiming this choice for herself. "I'd like to know. You're having a boy," the technician said with a smile. "A very active, healthy-looking boy. A son." Emotions washed over Cordelia in complicated waves. Joy at the healthy baby. A strange vindication that she was giving Reed the son he'd wanted so badly, but might never know. And a renewed determination to raise this child with values opposite to the Maxwell legacy of ambition at any cost. "A boy," she repeated softly, watching him move on the screen. "Hello, little man." After the appointment, Ellis found Cordelia sitting in the clinic's small garden, still processing the news. "Everything okay with the scan results?" Ellis asked, settling beside her on the bench. "Perfect," Cordelia assured her. "He's healthy and developing right on schedule." Ellis noted. "So you found out. How does that feel?" "Complicated," Cordelia admitted. Reed was obsessed with having a son first. He talked constantly about the Maxwell legacy, about grooming his heir from birth to eventually take over the company. And now I'm carrying the son he wanted so desperately, and he doesn't even know. Cordelia's hand went to her belly protectively. "Part of me feels guilty for keeping this from him, despite everything. But then I remember walking in on him with my mother, and I know I'm making the right choice. This child deserves better than to be molded into Reed's corporate clone or used as a pawn between warring parents." "You're a good mother already," Ellis said gently, "putting your child's well-being above everything else." "I'm trying," Cordelia sighed. "But sometimes I wonder if complete separation from his father is truly what's best. Reed is," she searched for words, "manipulative, controlling, unfaithful. But he's also brilliant, driven, capable of genuine passion for things he believes in. There are qualities in him I'd be proud to see in my son, just not the worst ones. That's the challenge all parents face," Ellis pointed out. "Hoping our children inherit our best traits while somehow avoiding our worst. The difference is, most parents have to figure it out together, whereas you're making these decisions alone for now." "For now," Cordelia repeated. "Until Reed eventually finds us. Because he will, won't he? A man with his resources, his determination." Ellis didn't offer false reassurance. "It's possible, which is why we're establishing legal protections now, why you have distance and time on your side." Cordelia nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I should call Juliana, update her on the pregnancy. And," she hesitated, "I think it's time to start discussing post-birth custody scenarios. I need to be prepared for every possibility." "Wise," Ellis agreed. "But remember, right now your priority is growing that healthy boy. The legal complexities will still be there after he arrives." That evening, Cordelia sat at her small desk by the window, the sunset painting the forest in golden hues as she opened her journal to a fresh page. "Hello, my son," she wrote, the words feeling more real now that she knew who she was addressing. "Today I saw your perfect little face on the ultrasound screen. You were sucking your thumb, your tiny features already so expressive. The technician says you're developing exactly as you should be, strong and healthy despite the stress and upheaval that surrounded your existence so far. I want you to know that no matter what happens with the legal battles ahead, no matter what role your father ultimately plays in your life, you were created in love. Not the lasting kind, as it turned out, but real love nonetheless. There was a time when your father and I dreamed of you together, planned for your arrival, imagined the family we would build. Those dreams have changed now, reshaped by painful truths and betrayals. But new dreams are taking their place. Dreams of raising a compassionate, honest man who values integrity over success, kindness over power. You won't inherit the Maxwell empire your father envisioned passing to you, but you'll inherit something more valuable. The freedom to become your own person, to define success on your own terms. I don't know yet what name I'll give you. Something meaningful, something that honors the good parts of your heritage while allowing you to build your own legacy. Something that reminds you daily that you are loved for exactly who you are, not for who anyone else wants you to be. She continued writing until the light faded completely, pouring out her hopes and fears for her son, creating a record he might someday read to understand the complicated circumstances of his birth and the difficult choices his mother had made to protect him. As the weeks passed, Cordelia's life settled into a rhythm punctuated by prenatal appointments, work deadlines, and weekly legal updates. Her small cabin gradually transformed with preparations for the baby, a crib tucked into the corner of her bedroom, a changing table repurposed from an old dresser Samuel had refinished for her, tiny clothes organized in baskets donated by the clinic staff. What had begun as a temporary hiding place was becoming a genuine home, and the close-knit community of Port Townsend increasingly felt like the extended family she'd never had. Georgia from the clinic organized a small baby shower where Cordelia received handmade blankets, gently used baby equipment, and enough newborn clothes to last through the first months. Samuel installed baby gates and anchored furniture to walls, his weathered hands working with surprising precision as he child-proofed the cabin. And Bennett continued stopping by, initially with prenatal supplements or work-related questions, but increasingly just to share tea and conversation. Their friendship grew cautiously, both aware of the complexities of Cordelia's situation, yet drawn to the easy intellectual connection they shared. "Have you thought about names?" Bennett asked one evening as they sat on her small porch, watching summer fade into early autumn. At 30 weeks, Cordelia's belly was prominently rounded, her son active and frequently visible through her stretched skin. "I have a short list," she admitted. "Nothing from either family. No Maxwell or Hayes traditions. Something completely new. A fresh start." Bennett nodded understanding. "That makes sense. What would you choose?" she asked, curious. "If you were naming a son?" Bennett considered the question seriously. Something with meaning, but not pretentious. Something that would work equally well for a doctor or an artist or whatever he might become. He thought for a moment longer. "Theodore, maybe. It means divine gift, and it has good nickname options." "Theodore," Cordelia repeated, feeling the baby shift as if responding to the name. "Theo. I like that. It's going on the list." Bennett smiled, clearly pleased. "And it doesn't sound like either a Hayes or a Maxwell family name?" "Definitely not," Cordelia confirmed. "The Maxwell men are all named after European monarchs or Greek gods. Very grand, very dynasty appropriate. And the Hayes family runs to biblical names. My grandfather was Elijah, my uncle is Jeremiah." "Theodore it is, then," Bennett said with satisfaction. "Though ultimately, you'll know the right name when you meet him." The comfortable silence that followed was interrupted by Cordelia's secure phone ringing, the line reserved for legal communications. She answered quickly, recognizing Juliana's number. "Cordelia, we have a situation," her attorney said without preamble. "Reed's filed an emergency motion claiming he's received credible information that you're in Washington state. He's requesting the court compel disclosure of your exact location for a welfare check." Cordelia's blood ran cold. "How? How could he know?" "We're trying to determine that." Juliana's voice was grim. "Have you had any contact with mutual acquaintances? Used credit cards? Anything that might have created a trail?" "No, nothing," Cordelia insisted, her mind racing. "I've been completely off-grid except for the secure channels Ellis set up." "What about work communications? Could someone from the Research Institute have inadvertently revealed something?" "Dr. Winters is the only one who knows I'm in Washington, and he'd never." Cordelia stopped abruptly, a horrible suspicion forming. "My mother. Could Reed have access to Dr. Winters' communications through my mother?" "Possibly," Juliana agreed. "Your mother was on the Institute's board of directors, wasn't she? And still is, according to their website. She has connections there, relationships with the administrative staff." Cordelia's voice shook slightly. If she pressured someone for information about my whereabouts, claiming maternal concern. That's a likely scenario, Juliana confirmed. The good news is that he only knows you're somewhere in Washington state, not your specific location. The bad news is that the judge is taking his request seriously given your advanced pregnancy. What do we do? Cordelia asked, acutely aware of Bennett listening intently beside her, his expression concerned. We can fight it, but that might raise more suspicions. Or we can control the narrative, Juliana suggested. Arrange a video conference with the judge where you confirm you're safe. The pregnancy is progressing normally, and you're under appropriate medical care. We emphasize that Reed's history of controlling behavior and infidelity necessitates maintaining your privacy until formal custody arrangements are established after birth. The video conference, Cordelia decided immediately. I have nothing to hide about my condition or care. But I won't disclose my location until legal protections are in place for my son. After ending the call, she turned to find Bennett watching her with a mixture of concern and admiration. He's getting closer, she said unnecessarily. My ex. He knows I'm in Washington. Washington is a big state, Bennett reminded her gently. And you have people protecting you here. The simple assurance touched Cordelia deeply. This unlikely community, Ellis, Samuel, Georgia, and now Bennett, had become her safety net, offering protection and support without question or judgment. I should be terrified, she admitted. But somehow, knowing all of you are with me. I'm not. Concerned, yes. Determined to protect my son, absolutely. But not afraid like I was when I first fled. Because you're stronger now, Bennett observed. You've been rebuilding yourself these past months, not just hiding. The insight was so perceptive that Cordelia felt momentarily transparent, as if Bennett could see straight through to her core. It was both unsettling and oddly comforting to be so clearly seen. I should go, Bennett said, standing. You need rest, especially with this new stress. But call if you need anything, day or night. I will, Cordelia promised. And Bennett, thank you for understanding without making me explain everything. His smile was warm as he headed to his truck, leaving Cordelia to contemplate this new threat and the surprising strength she'd found to face it. The video conference with the judge was scheduled for the following week. Cordelia prepared meticulously with Juliana, anticipating questions about her mental state, her pregnancy care, and her reasons for maintaining distance from Reed. Ellis provided detailed medical records documenting normal progression and appropriate prenatal care, with identifying location information carefully redacted. On the morning of the hearing, Cordelia dressed with deliberate care, a simple blue maternity dress that looked professional without appearing too polished, her short hair neatly styled, minimal makeup that highlighted her natural glow rather than concealing non-existent distress. The image she needed to project was clear, a healthy, rational woman making sound decisions for herself and her child, not the unstable runaway Reed had described in court filings. Ellis set up the secure video connection in her office, giving Cordelia privacy while remaining nearby if needed. When the call connected, Cordelia found herself facing Judge Patricia Hernandez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, alongside Juliana and Reed's attorney, a sharp-featured man Cordelia recognized as James Thornton, one of Los Angeles's most aggressive divorce lawyers. Mrs. Maxwell, Judge Hernandez began. Dr. Hayes, Your Honor, Cordelia corrected gently. I've resumed using my professional name. The judge nodded, making a note. Dr. Hayes, thank you for making yourself available for this conference. As you know, your husband, estranged husband, Juliana interjected. Estranged husband, the judge amended, has expressed concern about your well-being and that of your unborn child. He has requested the court compel disclosure of your location to facilitate a welfare check and appropriate prenatal care. I understand his stated concerns, Your Honor, Cordelia replied, emphasizing the words stated slightly. However, as the medical records provided to the court demonstrate, I am receiving excellent prenatal care from qualified professionals. My pregnancy is progressing normally, and both my physical and mental health are stable. You appear well, Judge Hernandez acknowledged, studying Cordelia through the screen. May I ask why you feel it necessary to conceal your location from Mr. Maxwell? He is, after all, the father of your child. Cordelia had anticipated this question. Your Honor, I left our marital home after discovering Mr. Maxwell in an intimate situation with another woman, a profound betrayal that coincided with learning of my pregnancy. Given the emotional trauma of that discovery and Mr. Maxwell's subsequent attempts to control my movements and medical decisions, I chose to relocate somewhere I could focus on my health and the well-being of my child without additional stress. She's being deliberately vague, Your Honor, Thornton interrupted. Dr. Hayes has a history of jealousy and emotional instability that preceded this alleged incident. Mr. Maxwell has been deeply concerned about her mental state, especially given her family history of postpartum depression. Objection, Juliana cut in sharply. There is no documented history of emotional instability in Dr. Hayes' medical records, and the alleged incident of infidelity is supported by hotel receipts and text messages already submitted to the court. As for family history, Dr. Hayes' mother experienced mild baby blues, not clinical postpartum depression, a fact Mr. Maxwell is distorting to support his narrative. The mention of her mother sent a jolt through Cordelia, but she maintained her composed expression. Judge Hernandez was watching her closely, clearly assessing her reactions. Dr. Hayes, the judge addressed her directly. What are your intentions regarding Mr. Maxwell's relationship with the child after birth? I believe children benefit from positive relationships with both parents, Your Honor, Cordelia answered carefully. Once appropriate legal protections are in place to prevent parental alienation or attempts to remove my child from my care, I am open to establishing reasonable visitation arrangements that prioritize my son's well-being and stability. Your son, Thornton pounced on the revelation. So you know the sex of the child, but have withheld that information from my client? I learned the sex at my 20-week anatomy scan, Cordelia confirmed calmly. As Mr. Maxwell and I were no longer communicating directly at that point due to his threats regarding custody, I provided that information to his legal counsel in my regular pregnancy updates, as required by the temporary orders. Judge Hernandez consulted the file before her. The records confirm Dr. Hayes has been providing bi-weekly pregnancy updates through counsel, including the sex determination on July 15th. Thornton looked momentarily discomfited, suggesting Reed hadn't shared this information with him, or perhaps that Reed had deliberately misled his own attorney about the level of communication. Your Honor, Juliana redirected. Dr. Hayes has demonstrated responsible behavior throughout this pregnancy, maintaining appropriate medical care and complying with all court requirements regarding information sharing. Mr. Maxwell's demand for her location is not motivated by genuine concern, but by a desire to reassert control over Dr. Hayes and preemptively establish dominance in future custody matters. The judge considered this, her expression thoughtful. Dr. Hayes, would you be amenable to an in-person evaluation by a court-appointed physician to verify your condition, if that physician was bound by confidentiality regarding your location? Cordelia glanced at Juliana, who gave a subtle nod. I would accept that compromise, Your Honor, provided the evaluation takes place at a neutral location rather than my residence, and with strict confidentiality protections in place. So ordered, Judge Hernandez decided. The court will appoint an obstetrician in Washington State for an evaluation within the next 2 weeks. Location details will be arranged through counsel, with confidentiality agreements signed by all parties. As the hearing concluded, Cordelia felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. She had presented well, maintained her composure, and the judge seemed receptive to her concerns about Reed's motivations. But the court-ordered evaluation meant creating a paper trail, however protected, that moved her one step closer to eventual discovery. You did beautifully, Ellis assured her afterward. Judge Hernandez clearly saw through Reed's concerned husband act. For now, Cordelia agreed. But this is just the beginning. Once the baby is born, the real battle starts. Ellis squeezed her hand supportively. One step at a time. Let's focus on getting through this evaluation first, then the remaining weeks of your pregnancy. The legal team can work on post-birth strategies while you concentrate on bringing that little boy safely into the world. The court-appointed evaluation took place the following week at a hospital in Seattle, nearly 2 hours from Port Townsend. Dr. Lydia Chun, a maternal-fetal medicine specialist with no connections to either party, conducted a thorough examination and reviewed Cordelia's prenatal records. Your pregnancy is progressing beautifully, Dr. Chun confirmed at the conclusion. Blood pressure, fetal heart rate, growth measurements, all optimal. And your mental health screening shows no concerning indicators. Will that be in your report to the court? Cordelia asked. It will, Dr. Chun assured her. Along with my professional opinion that you are making sound medical decisions for yourself and your baby. I cannot and will not speculate on the legal matters surrounding your separation, but from a medical perspective, you're doing everything right. The validation from an impartial specialist bolstered Cordelia's confidence as she entered her third trimester. With the court seemingly satisfied about her well-being for now, she focused on final preparations for the baby's arrival. The cabin was fully equipped with essentials, a birth plan was established with Ellis and the local hospital, and Juliana was preparing legal documents to file immediately after the birth to establish custody parameters. As her due date approached, Cordelia found herself increasingly drawn to the name Bennett had suggested. Theodore, Theo for short, felt right somehow, a name with gravitas but not pretension, traditional without family baggage. Theodore Hayes, she tried out loud one evening, feeling the baby respond with a strong kick. You like that, don't you, little one? Theo Hayes, a name all your own. She added a middle name, William, after her beloved grandfather on her father's side, completing the identity that would belong solely to her son, untethered from the Maxwell legacy Reed had been so determined to perpetuate. At 38 weeks, with just days to go before her due date, Cordelia woke in the middle of the night to a familiar tightening across her abdomen. She'd been experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks, but this felt different, more purposeful, coming at regular intervals. She timed them carefully for an hour before calling Ellis. 5 minutes apart, lasting about 45 seconds, she reported. And I think my water might be slowly leaking. Sounds like the real thing, Ellis confirmed. I'll meet you at the hospital. Do you want me to call Bennett to drive you? No need to wake him, Cordelia decided. I can still drive myself. The contractions are manageable. Cordelia. Ellis's voice took on the firm tone she used with non-compliant patients. You are not driving yourself to the hospital in active labor. I'm calling Bennett. He's on call tonight anyway and already at the hospital with another patient. He can send an ambulance if necessary. Fine, Cordelia conceded, another contraction building. But no ambulance. Just let him know I'll need a ride. 20 minutes later, Bennett's truck pulled up outside her cabin. He found Cordelia calmly seated on the sofa, her hospital bag beside her, breathing methodically through a contraction. Perfect timing, she managed as the contraction eased. That was a strong one. How close together? Bennett asked, immediately in doctor mode. For minutes now, getting more intense. Let's go then, he said, helping her to her feet. Your son seems eager to meet you. The drive to the small community hospital was punctuated by Cordelia's controlled breathing as contractions came and went. Bennett maintained a calm, reassuring presence, timing the contractions without intruding on her concentration. You're remarkably composed for a first-time mother in active labor, he observed during a break between contractions. I've had months to prepare, Cordelia replied with a small smile. Read every book, took every class Ellis recommended. And after everything else this year has thrown at me, labor seems almost straightforward in comparison. Physical pain with a purpose, leading to something beautiful. Bennett glanced at her with unmistakable admiration. You're extraordinary, you know that? Most people would have broken under half the pressure you've faced. Not broken, Cordelia corrected as another contraction began. Just transformed into someone stronger than I knew I could be. At the hospital, Ellis was waiting with the labor and delivery team. Cordelia's labor progressed rapidly, her body seemingly as efficient in childbirth as in everything else. For hours after arrival, with Ellis's steady guidance and a nurse named Maya providing additional support, Cordelia delivered her son with 3 determined pushes. He's here, Ellis announced, placing the squirming, crying infant on Cordelia's chest. Your beautiful boy. Time seemed to stop as Cordelia gazed down at her son for the first time. His tiny face was scrunched in protest at the bright new world, his fists waving angrily as he wailed his displeasure. Despite the vernix still coating his skin and the slight cone shape to his head from the birth canal, she could already see hints of his parentage, Reed's strong chin, her darker coloring. "Hello, Theodore," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my brave little Theo. I've been waiting for you." The newborn's cries settled at the sound of her voice, his eyes squinting open briefly before closing again, his tiny body relaxing against her skin. The profound love that washed over Cordelia in that moment was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Fierce, protective, all-encompassing. "We did it," she told him, stroking his damp hair with a gentle finger. "Just you and me. And we're going to be okay." Ellis allowed mother and baby this uninterrupted bonding time, completing the necessary post-delivery procedures with minimal disruption. When she finally needed to take Theo for his newborn assessment, Cordelia reluctantly released him, watching anxiously as Ellis carried him to the warming table. "Perfect APGAR scores," Ellis reported as she examined him. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, 21 inches long. Absolutely healthy in every way. "He's beautiful," Maya the nurse agreed, wrapping Theo in a soft blanket before returning him to Cordelia's arms. "And he looks just like his mama." The simple comment brought unexpected comfort. Despite the unmistakable Maxwell features Cordelia could identify, to an objective observer, Theo resembled her more than Reed. It was a small victory, but one she cherished in that moment. Hours later, settled in a private recovery room with Theo sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed, Cordelia made the call she'd been both dreading and anticipating. Juliana answered immediately despite the early hour. "He's here," Cordelia said simply. "Theodore William Hayes. Born at 3:17 this morning. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Healthy and perfect. Congratulations." Juliana's genuine warmth came through despite the professional tone. "I'll file the birth certificate paperwork with your chosen name immediately, along with the emergency custody motion we prepared. Do you want to proceed with notifying Reed as we discussed?" "Yes," Cordelia confirmed, gazing at her sleeping son. "He deserves to know his child has been born safely, even if I'm not ready for direct contact. Send the official notification through legal channels, with the photo we discussed." The strategy they developed was careful, acknowledging Reed's paternity and providing proof of Theo's healthy birth via a single professional photo, while maintaining the legal barriers that protected Cordelia's location and primary custody until court-ordered arrangements could be established. "And the other matter?" Juliana asked delicately. "My mother," Cordelia sighed, the pain still sharp despite the months of separation. "No, don't notify her. She made her choice when she continued her relationship with Reed after I left. She doesn't get to be part of Theo's life until she demonstrates she can be trusted, which may be never." After ending the call, Cordelia reached into the bassinet to gently stroke Theo's perfect cheek. He stirred slightly, his tiny mouth making suckling movements in his sleep. "It's just you and me for now, little one," she whispered. "But we're surrounded by good people who care about us. And someday, when it's safe, we'll figure out what role your father plays in your life. I promise I'll always do what's best for you, even when it's difficult, even when it breaks my heart." The first 2 weeks of Theo's life passed in the blur of newborn care, feeding, changing, brief periods of alertness, and the precious moments of sleep Cordelia managed between his needs. Ellis checked on them daily. Samuel brought homemade meals, and Georgia organized a rotation of clinic staff to help with household chores while Cordelia recovered and bonded with her son. Bennett visited regularly, initially for professional postpartum checks, but increasingly just to sit with Cordelia, holding Theo while she napped or showered, discussing everything from the latest medical research to the changing autumn colors visible from her cabin windows. "He's thriving," Bennett observed one afternoon as Theo nursed contentedly, his tiny hand pressed against Cordelia's skin. "And you seem to be adapting to motherhood remarkably well." "It feels natural," Cordelia admitted. "More natural than I expected, given how unnatural our circumstances are. When I'm with him, everything else fades away, the divorce, the legal battles ahead, even the betrayal that started it all. It's just us, figuring out our new life together." "That's how it should be," Bennett smiled. "These early weeks are precious. The legal complications will still be there when you're ready to face them." But the legal complications intruded sooner than expected. When Theo was just 3 weeks old, Juliana called with concerning news. "Reed's filed for emergency custody," she reported grimly. "He's claiming that your continued concealment of his son constitutes parental alienation and demanding immediate supervised visitation pending a full custody hearing. He can't possibly think a court will remove a 3-week-old from his nursing mother, Cordelia protested, instinctively clutching Theo closer as he slept in her arms. No, but he might succeed in forcing disclosure of your location and establishing court-mandated visitation, even for an infant, Juliana explained. His lawyers are arguing that bonding with both parents from birth is critical to development, and that your actions demonstrate an intent to prevent father-child attachment. What are our options? Cordelia asked, her mind racing. We counter with our own emergency motion citing your recent childbirth, the established breastfeeding relationship, and Reed's documented history of controlling behavior as reasons to maintain the status quo until Theo is at least 3 months old, Juliana proposed. We offer video visitation in the interim, gradually transitioning to in-person supervised visits at a neutral location once you're physically recovered and Theo has a more established routine. Will that work? It's reasonable enough that most judges would be inclined to grant it, especially given your consistent willingness to establish appropriate contact once safety measures are in place, Juliana assured her. The problem is that Reed isn't being reasonable. He's escalating, Cordelia, and he's using resources most estranged husbands don't have. What do you mean? His investigators, Juliana's voice lowered. They've been questioning doctors throughout Washington who specialize in high-risk pregnancies, showing your photo, claiming to be concerned family members. And there are reports they've been focusing increasingly on the Olympic Peninsula region. The chill that ran through Cordelia had nothing to do with the autumn air outside her cabin. He's getting closer. Yes, Juliana confirmed. Which means we need to be proactive. I recommend we approach the court first, requesting a structured reintroduction plan that acknowledges Reed's paternal rights while protecting your autonomy and Theo's stability. If we demonstrate reasonableness, the judge is more likely to view Reed's aggressive tactics unfavorably. Do it, Cordelia decided, looking down at her sleeping son. Draft whatever you think gives us the best protection while still appearing cooperative. After ending the call, Cordelia sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the October rain pattering against the glass as Theo slept peacefully against her chest. The precarious peace she'd established in Port Townsend was threatened now, the protective bubble around her and Theo growing thinner by the day. She knew with increasing certainty that a direct confrontation with Reed was inevitable. The question was no longer if, but when, and how prepared she would be when that moment arrived. The answer came sooner than she expected. 3 days later, as Cordelia was walking back from the clinic with Theo snuggled against her in a carrier, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled alongside her on the quiet road. The passenger window lowered, revealing a face she had hoped never to see again. "Hello, Cordelia," Reed Maxwell said, his voice as coolly controlled as she remembered. "I think it's time we talked about my son." For a moment, Cordelia stood frozen, her arms instinctively tightening around Theo. Reed looked exactly as she remembered, yet somehow different. The same perfectly tailored clothes, the same commanding presence, but new lines around his eyes, a hardness to his expression that hadn't been there before. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have resources," he replied simply, "and motivation. That's my child you're carrying." "His name is Theodore," Cordelia said, finding strength in naming her son. "Theodore William Hayes. And yes, biologically he's your child. But you gave up any right to call him yours when you chose to sleep with my mother in our bed." Reed's expression tightened at the direct reference to his betrayal. "Get in the car, Cordelia. We need to discuss this privately." "No," she refused firmly. "I'm not getting into a vehicle with you. If you want to talk, we can meet somewhere public with my attorney present." Still so dramatic, Reed sighed with exaggerated patience. "Fine. The cafe in town, 1 hour. Bring the baby." 2 hours, Cordelia countered. "Theo needs to be fed and changed. And I'll be bringing someone with me." "Not your lawyer," Reed stipulated. "This stays between us for now." "Not my lawyer," Cordelia agreed. "But I won't be alone." Reed considered this, his calculating gaze moving between her face and the bundle strapped to her chest. 2 hours. Don't make me come looking for you again." As the SUV pulled away, Cordelia released the breath she'd been holding, her hands shaking as she checked that Theo was still sleeping peacefully, undisturbed by the encounter. She pulled out her phone and made 2 calls in quick succession, first to Bennett, then to Ellis. Both responded immediately to the urgency in her voice, and within 30 minutes, they were gathered in Ellis's office at the clinic, Theo now awake and nursing as Cordelia explained the situation. "You can't meet him alone," Ellis insisted, her normally calm demeanor giving way to protective anger. "Reed Maxwell is a controlling, manipulative man who's been hunting you down for months. This could be a trap." "I don't intend to be alone," Cordelia assured her. "That's why I called Bennett." Reed specified no lawyers, but he doesn't know Bennett. "Having a doctor with me gives me medical backup if needed, while appearing less confrontational than legal representation." Bennett nodded his understanding. "I'll stay calm, professional, and focus on Theo's well-being if questions arise." "But Cordelia, Ellis is right about the potential risks. What's to stop him from trying to take Theo by force once he has you both in a public place?" Several things. Cordelia had already considered this. First, Reed is obsessed with public image. Creating a scene in the town cafe would generate exactly the kind of attention he avoids. Second, legally he'd be committing parental kidnapping since I have temporary sole custody pending court hearings. And third, she added with grim determination, "I will not let him take my son. Period." The fierce maternal protection in her voice left no room for doubt. This was not the same woman who had fled Los Angeles in panic and grief 6 months earlier. This was a mother prepared to fight with everything she had. "We should have backup regardless," Ellis insisted. "I'll call Samuel. He can sit at another table, appear to be a random patron. And I'll alert Georgia to have her phone ready to call the sheriff at the first sign of trouble." "Agreed," Cordelia nodded. "But I need to face him, Ellis. Continuing to hide will only escalate the situation. Better to establish boundaries now, on my terms, than wait until he forces a confrontation on his." 2 hours after the roadside encounter, Cordelia entered the town's busy cafe with Theo secured in his carrier against her chest and Bennett walking protectively beside her. She dressed carefully, practical nursing-accessible clothes rather than anything that might suggest she'd prepared specially for this meeting. Her short hair was simply styled, her face bearing only minimal makeup. The message was clear. This was her everyday life now, not a special occasion warranting extra effort. Reed was already seated at a corner table, his expensive suit and commanding presence drawing curious glances from the local patrons. His eyes fixed on Cordelia immediately, narrowing slightly when he registered Bennett's presence beside her. "I said alone," he remarked coldly as they approached. "You said no lawyers," Cordelia corrected, sliding into the seat across from him. "This is Dr. Park, Theo's pediatrician. Given that this conversation concerns a 4-week-old infant, having medical expertise present seemed prudent." Reed's gaze shifted to Bennett, assessing him with the calculated precision he applied to business competitors. Bennett met his stare evenly, his expression professionally neutral despite the tension radiating between them. "Fine," Reed conceded, his attention returning to the carrier strapped to Cordelia's chest. "I want to see my son. His name is Theodore," Cordelia reminded him, carefully unbuckling the carrier. "Theo for short." She lifted the sleeping infant out, cradling him so Reed could see his face. Despite her determination to remain emotionally detached, something twisted painfully in her chest as she watched Reed see his son for the first time. The hard lines of his face softened momentarily, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. "He looks like me," Reed observed quietly, reaching out a finger toward Theo's cheek. Cordelia instinctively pulled back slightly. "Medical clearance first. Dr. Park can verify you don't have any contagious conditions before you touch a newborn." It was a reasonable precaution that also served to establish her authority as Theo's primary protector. Reed's jaw tightened, but he submitted to Bennett's brief questioning about recent illnesses and hand sanitizing before being allowed to touch his son. "He's perfect," Reed said, his finger gently tracing Theo's small features. "Exactly what I imagined our child would be." "What do you want, Reed?" Cordelia asked directly, wanting to move past the false sentimentality. "Why track us down rather than working through legal channels?" Reed's expression hardened again, the businessman replacing the momentarily affected father. "Legal channels were getting me nowhere. You've been hiding my son from me for months, Cordelia. What did you expect? I expected you to respect the temporary court orders while we established a reasonable custody arrangement, she replied evenly. Instead, you hired investigators to hunt me down, frightening a woman who was first pregnant and then caring for a newborn. You left me no choice, Reed countered. You disappeared without warning, taking my heir with you. After finding you in bed with my mother, Cordelia reminded him, her voice low but intense. After discovering that the two people I trusted most had been betraying me for months while I was undergoing fertility treatments, blaming myself for our inability to conceive. Reed had the grace to look momentarily discomfited, but recovered quickly. That situation was unfortunate, but it doesn't justify depriving me of my son, the Maxwell name and legacy. Stop, Cordelia interrupted. Just stop. Theo is not a Maxwell. Legally, medically, in every way that matters, he is Theodore William Hayes. He will not be a pawn in your corporate dynasty plans or a band-aid for your damaged marriage. Our marriage isn't over yet, Reed pointed out. The divorce isn't final. It is over, Cordelia stated firmly. It ended the moment I found you with my mother. The legal formalities are just paperwork. Reed studied her face, seeming to truly see the changes in her for the first time. The confidence, the unwavering resolve, the absence of the deference she had once shown him. You've changed, he observed. Yes, she agreed simply. Motherhood will do that. So will betrayal. So will rebuilding your life from scratch. Theo began to stir in her arms, making the small rooting motions that signaled hunger. Cordelia adjusted her position, preparing to nurse him. Not here, Reed said sharply, glancing around the cafe. Yes, here, Cordelia countered calmly. He's hungry, and I feed my son when he needs it, wherever we happen to be. I use a cover for privacy, but I don't hide natural infant feeding to make others comfortable. Without waiting for further objection, she draped a light muslin cloth over her shoulder and positioned Theo to nurse, maintaining eye contact with Reed throughout to make clear this was non-negotiable. Bennett, who had remained silent during the exchange, spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss practical next steps while Theo is feeding. Dr. Hayes has indicated willingness to establish appropriate visitation once certain conditions are met. What conditions? Reed demanded, his attention shifting reluctantly from the nursing baby to Bennett. Legal recognition of Theodore's name as chosen by his mother, Bennett began, reciting the points Cordelia had outlined earlier. Formal custody arrangements that acknowledge Dr. Hayes as primary caregiver with liberal but structured visitation for you. Agreement that Theo will not be removed from Washington State without mutual consent until he's at least 1 year old. And supervised visits initially, transitioning to unsupervised as trust is established. Supervised? Reed's voice rose slightly. I'm his father, not some criminal needing supervision. You're also a stranger to him, Cordelia pointed out. He's 4 weeks old, exclusively breastfed, and has never been separated from me. Gradual introduction is healthiest for his development. This is ridiculous, Reed said dismissively. I have rights. Yes, you do, Cordelia acknowledged. And I'm offering a reasonable path to exercising those rights in a way that prioritizes Theo's well-being. But if you prefer, we can return to court, where I'll request full psychological evaluations, parenting assessments, and detailed investigation of your relationship with my mother as it relates to your fitness as a parent. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Reed was intelligent enough to recognize the damage such public scrutiny could do to both his corporate image and his custody case. I want DNA testing, he countered. Proof he's mine. Already arranged, Cordelia said. Dr. Park can collect your sample today, with results in approximately 2 weeks. Reed's eyes narrowed. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had months to prepare for this moment, Cordelia replied. While you were busy with my mother and your corporate empire, I was focused solely on protecting my child. Our child, Reed corrected automatically. Biologically, yes, Cordelia conceded. But being a father is about more than genetics, Reed. It's about choices, priorities, trustworthiness. You'll need to demonstrate all of those before you're truly Theo's father in any meaningful sense. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Reed's confident expression. This was not the confrontation he had anticipated, not the tearful, intimidated Cordelia he had expected to manipulate. The woman before him was formidable in her quiet determination, unmoved by his usual tactics of pressure and control. "Where do we go from here?" he asked finally, his tone marginally less confrontational. "You return to your hotel," Cordelia instructed. "I'll have my attorney contact yours tomorrow with formal visitation proposals consistent with what Dr. Park outlined. Once those are agreed upon, we can begin structured visits, starting with short periods here at the cafe with me present, gradually increasing duration as Theo becomes comfortable with you." "And if I don't agree to your terms?" Reed challenged. "Then we continue through the courts," Cordelia replied calmly, "where I will present evidence of your affair with my mother, your aggressive pursuit tactics, and expert testimony regarding the developmental needs of newborns. You'll eventually get some form of visitation, but it will be more restricted, more supervised, and more damaging to your public image than what I'm offering privately." Reed studied her for a long moment, calculation evident in his expression. "You really aren't afraid of me anymore, are you?" "No," Cordelia confirmed. "I'm too busy being Theo's mother to waste energy on fear. But I am determined to protect him, even from his own father if necessary." Something shifted in Reed's demeanor, a subtle acknowledgement that the power dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. He might have greater financial resources and business influence, but Cordelia possessed the moral high ground and maternal authority that no court would easily dismiss. "I'll review your proposal," he said finally. "Have your lawyer send it to Thornton tomorrow. One more thing," Cordelia added as Theo finished nursing and she carefully burped him. "My mother. I don't want her involved in any visitation, now or in the future. That's non-negotiable." A strange expression crossed Reed's face. "That won't be an issue," he said after a moment. "Evelyn and I are no longer involved." "I don't care about your romantic status," Cordelia clarified. "I'm stating clearly that the woman who betrayed her own daughter will not have access to my son. Ever." "Understood," Reed nodded, his gaze returning to Theo, who was now awake and looking around with unfocused newborn curiosity. "May I hold him before I go?" The request, expressed with uncharacteristic humility, caught Cordelia off guard. She glanced at Bennett, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Briefly, she agreed, rising to carefully transfer Theo to Reed's arms, adjusting his hold to properly support the baby's head. "Like this." Reed looked almost awkward, a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms now cradling a tiny human with obvious uncertainty. But as Theo settled against him, his expression transformed again, the hardness giving way to something that might have been wonder. "Hello, Theodore," he said softly, using the formal name Cordelia had chosen. "I'm your father." Theo gazed up at the new face, neither distressed nor particularly impressed, simply taking in this new experience with the passive acceptance of a newborn. After a few moments, Cordelia reclaimed him, sensing Reed had received the symbolic acknowledgement he needed for now. "I'll have Juliana send the proposal tomorrow," she confirmed as she secured Theo back in his carrier. "We can proceed from there." As she and Bennett left the cafe, Cordelia felt a strange mixture of relief and residual tension. The confrontation had gone better than she'd feared, but confirmed that the road ahead would be challenging. Reed had been knocked off balance today, but he would regroup, strategize, and approach their next encounter with renewed determination to assert control. "You were magnificent," Bennett said quietly as they walked back toward her cabin. Calm, clear, unwavering. He didn't know what hit him. "He will next time," Cordelia predicted. "Reed doesn't handle being outmaneuvered well. He'll come back with counterproposals, demands, possibly even charm if he thinks it will work. But you'll be ready," Bennett reminded her. "And you won't be facing him alone." Cordelia glanced at him, gratitude washing through her for this unexpected ally who had become so important in her new life. "No, I won't be alone," she agreed. "That makes all the difference." The months that followed established a new normal that none of them could have predicted. Reed rented a house in Port Townsend, commuting to Seattle 3 days a week for business, while maintaining a local presence to exercise his visitation rights with Theo. The DNA test confirmed what was visually obvious. He was unquestionably Theo's biological father, and a formal custody arrangement was established, giving Cordelia primary custody, with Reed having progressively increasing visitation as Theo grew. The divorce proceedings continued in parallel, with Reed finally conceding to most of Cordelia's terms once he secured regular access to his son. The settlement was generous, acknowledging the circumstances of their separation without publicly naming Evelyn as the other party in the adultery claim. By Theo's 6-month milestone, a fragile peace had been established. Reed had proven himself surprisingly adaptable to co-parenting, following Cordelia's lead on feeding schedules, sleep routines, and developmental activities. His initial attempts to assert control had gradually given way to genuine interest in his son's well-being. Perhaps the first time in his life Reed had prioritized someone else's needs above his own ambitions. "He's actually not terrible at this," Cordelia admitted to Bennett one evening as they walked along the harbor after Theo's handoff to Reed for his weekly overnight visit. "I never thought I'd say that, but he's making a real effort." "People can surprise you," Bennett observed. "Sometimes becoming a parent changes priorities in ways nothing else can." "It's certainly changed mine," Cordelia agreed, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. "A year ago, I was a different person entirely, focused on career advancement, social standing, maintaining the perfect image of a successful power couple. Now, success means Theo's happy smile when he wakes up, or mastering a new research protocol that might help patients, or—" She hesitated, glancing at Bennett, finding connections that are genuine rather than advantageous. Bennett's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity that had developed between them over months of shared experiences. "Like this one?" he asked softly. "Exactly like this one," she confirmed, squeezing his hand gently. They had been careful, taking things slowly out of respect for Cordelia's still healing heart and the complexities of her co-parenting situation. But the connection between them had deepened gradually from professional respect to friendship to something increasingly profound. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Bennett said as they continued their walk. "The research hospital in Seattle has approached me about joining a study on rural healthcare access. It would mean 1 day a week in the city, but the rest of my practice would remain here with Ellis." "That sounds like an amazing opportunity," Cordelia said sincerely. "You should definitely consider it." "I am," he nodded. "But there's another component. They're looking for an immunology consultant to develop treatments that can be administered in rural settings. When I mentioned your work, they expressed interest in bringing you on as well." Cordelia stopped walking, turning to face him. "Are you serious? The Seattle Research Institute wants me as a consultant." "They were very impressed with your recent paper," Bennett confirmed. "And when I explained your current situation, single mother, established in Port Townsend, they indicated flexibility about on-site requirements. Most of the work could be done remotely, with perhaps 1 day a week in Seattle." "The same day you'd be there," Cordelia noted, seeing the intentional coordination. "Potentially," Bennett acknowledged with a slight smile. "I might have mentioned that arranging our schedules to coincide would be efficient." Cordelia laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet harbor. "Efficient? Very clinical description, Dr. Park. Would you prefer I said I'd like to spend more time with you, including the occasional child-free workday in the city with perhaps dinner afterward?" Bennett's eyes were warm with affection and humor. "Much better," Cordelia approved, stepping closer to him. "And yes, I'd be interested in the research position. And the dinner." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both acknowledging the significance of this step. When they parted, Bennett rested his forehead against hers briefly. "I've wanted to do that for months," he admitted. "But I needed to be sure you were ready." "I think I have been for a while," Cordelia replied softly. "I just needed to be certain I was choosing this for the right reasons, not loneliness or gratitude or security, but because of who you are and how we are together." Their moment was interrupted by Cordelia's phone ringing, Reed's distinctive tone. She answered immediately, concern flickering across her face. "Is Theo okay?" she asked without preamble. "He's fine," Reed assured her. "Sleeping peacefully. I'm calling about something else. Evelyn contacted me today. She's been trying to reach you without success." Cordelia tensed, the mention of her mother still triggering a complex surge of pain and anger. "I have nothing to say to her." "She's ill, Cordelia," Reed said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Cancer. Advanced stage. She's starting treatment next week, but the prognosis isn't good." The news hit Cordelia like a physical blow, unexpected despite the complicated emotions surrounding her mother. I don't know what you expect me to do with that information, she managed finally. Nothing, Reed replied. I'm just passing it along, as she requested. What you do with it is entirely your decision. After ending the call, Cordelia stood silently, processing this new complication. Bennett waited patiently beside her, his hand a steady presence on her back. My mother is sick, she said finally. Cancer. Apparently serious. I'm sorry, Bennett said simply. Despite everything, that's difficult news to receive. Is it wrong that I don't know what to feel? Cordelia asked, genuinely uncertain. She betrayed me in the most profound way possible, continued a relationship with Reed after I left, made no attempt to apologize or explain. And yet she's still your mother, Bennett finished for her. The person who raised you, who was part of your life for decades before the betrayal. It's natural to have complicated feelings about this. What would you do? Cordelia asked, needing his perspective. Bennett considered the question seriously. I can't answer that for you. But I think you need to make a decision you can live with long-term. One that won't leave you with regrets when it's too late to change course. His wisdom, as always, cut through her confusion to the heart of the matter. Whatever she decided about her mother, it needed to come from a place of clarity rather than reactive emotion. I need time to think, she said finally, to decide what's best for me, for Theo, for our future. Take all the time you need, Bennett assured her. I'll be here, whatever you decide. In the weeks that followed, Cordelia carefully considered her options regarding her mother. She consulted with her therapist, discussed the situation hypothetically with Ellis, and spent long hours reflecting on what approach would bring healing rather than additional pain. Finally, on a crisp December morning, with Theo securely in Reed's care for his regular visitation, Cordelia made the drive to Seattle where her mother was undergoing treatment. The hospital was modern, expensive, the kind where wealthy patients receive the most advanced care available. Evelyn Hayes had always prioritized comfort and status, even in illness. Cordelia found her mother's private room easily, pausing in the doorway to observe the woman she hadn't seen in nearly a year. Evelyn looked shockingly diminished, her once vibrant figure thin beneath the hospital blankets, her carefully maintained blonde hair replaced by a silk scarf covering what Cordelia assumed was chemo-induced hair loss. But her elegant manicure remained, as did the designer robe draped over her hospital gown. Some habits persisted even in crisis. Mother, Cordelia said quietly, announcing her presence. Evelyn's head turned sharply, her eyes widening in obvious surprise. Cordelia? You came. Reed told me you were ill, Cordelia explained, remaining in the doorway. I thought we should talk. Please, come in. Evelyn gestured to the chair beside her bed. I've been trying to reach you for months. I know, Cordelia acknowledged, moving into the room but not yet sitting. I wasn't ready to hear anything you had to say. And now? Evelyn asked, her voice weaker than Cordelia remembered, but still carrying that distinctive tone that had narrated her childhood. Now I'm here to listen, Cordelia said carefully. Not to forgive, not necessarily to reconcile, but to hear what you have to say while there's still time to say it. Evelyn nodded, accepting these terms. You look well, she observed. Motherhood suits you. It does, Cordelia agreed. Theo is thriving. He's the center of my world. Theo. Evelyn repeated the name. Reed mentioned you named him Theodore. It's a strong name. Dignified. He's a remarkable child, Cordelia said, unwilling to share more details about her son. But I didn't come to discuss Theo. I came to understand, if I can, how my mother could betray me the way you did. The directness seemed to catch Evelyn off guard, but she nodded again, accepting the confrontation. I've had a lot of time to think about that question, especially since the diagnosis. There's no justification, Cordelia. Nothing I can say that would make what I did acceptable. Try anyway, Cordelia instructed, finally taking the chair, but maintaining distance. I want to hear your thought process. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, seemingly gathering her thoughts. After your father died, I was lost. More than I let anyone see. Harold had been my whole world for 30 years. My identity was completely wrapped up in being his wife, your mother, the perfect corporate spouse. When he was gone, I had no idea who I was anymore. So you decided to become your daughter's husband's lover? Cordelia couldn't keep the bitter edge from her voice. That was your solution to an identity crisis? It wasn't planned, Evelyn insisted. When you and Reed got married, you both made me feel included, valued. Reed would consult me on business matters, ask my opinion about investments, things Harold had always handled. It made me feel relevant again, respected. That doesn't explain how consultations turned into an affair, Cordelia pressed. It happened gradually, Evelyn admitted. Late-night discussions after you were asleep or traveling for work. Confidences shared about his business concerns, my loneliness. Reed was attentive in a way I hadn't experienced since your father's early illness. And I was flattering to his ego, admiring, supportive, undemanding. Unlike me, Cordelia noted, the pieces falling into place. I challenged him, expected partnership rather than adoration. He resented that more than you knew, Evelyn confirmed. Reed needs admiration the way most people need air. Your success in your own field threatened him, though he'd never admit it. The insight into her former marriage might have been valuable a year earlier. Now, it merely confirmed what Cordelia had gradually realized on her own, that Reed had wanted a supportive accessory more than an equal partner. When did it become physical? She asked, needing the full timeline. 6 months before you found us, Evelyn admitted, her gaze dropping to her thin hands. After that charity gala for the children's hospital. You had to leave early for a work emergency. Reed was angry that you'd prioritized work over his event. I comforted him. The memory of that night came back sharply. An important research trial had shown unexpected complications, requiring Cordelia's immediate attention. Reed had been cold for days afterward, accusing her of embarrassing him by leaving his side during important networking opportunities. You comforted him, Cordelia repeated flatly. By sleeping with him. Yes, Evelyn acknowledged simply. It was unforgivable. A moment of weakness that became a pattern of betrayal. A pattern that continued even after I left, Cordelia pointed out. You moved into my house, appeared publicly with my husband, all while knowing I was pregnant with his child. I told myself you had abandoned him. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. That you'd overreacted, that eventually you'd come back, and we'd find some way to repair the damage. When months passed without word, Reed convinced me you wanted nothing to do with either of us, that we might as well find comfort in each other. Convenient rationalization, Cordelia observed coldly. Yes, Evelyn agreed, surprising Cordelia with her candor. I've had a lot of therapy since the diagnosis. Enough to recognize the self-deception I engaged in to justify my actions. She looked up, meeting Cordelia's gaze directly. I destroyed our relationship for temporary validation from a man who discarded me the moment he confirmed Theo's paternity. There's no excuse for that. Only profound regret. The admission hung in the air between them, stripped of justifications or deflections. Just the raw truth of a terrible choice and its irreversible consequences. When did it end with Reed? Cordelia asked, curious despite herself. The day he received legal confirmation that Theo was his son, Evelyn replied. He came home, packed his things, and informed me he was relocating to Washington State to be near his child. Said our arrangement had run its course. And you were surprised by this? Cordelia couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. After watching how he treated me, I thought I was different, Evelyn admitted with a self-deprecating laugh that turned into a small cough. The eternal delusion of the other woman. I knew the patterns from watching him with you, but convinced myself they didn't apply to me. That I understood him better, supported him more effectively. Until you weren't useful anymore, Cordelia concluded. Exactly. Evelyn adjusted her position slightly, wincing with the movement. The universe has a certain poetry to its justice sometimes. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and separate pain filling the space between them. I don't hate you, Cordelia said finally. I thought I did for a long time. But hate requires energy I'd rather direct elsewhere. What I feel now is pity, maybe. For the choices you made and what they cost you. Pity is fair, Evelyn acknowledged. I've lost my daughter, my grandson, my self-respect, and now, it seems, my health. A comprehensive accounting for my sins. Is that why you wanted to see me? For absolution before the end? No. Evelyn shook her head slightly. I wanted to apologize, yes. But more than that, I wanted you to know that despite my terrible choices, I am proud of the woman you've become. Reed told me how you've handled everything. Your pregnancy, the legal battles, establishing a new life. You've shown a strength I never possessed. The unexpected praise from the woman whose approval Cordelia had sought for most of her life stirred complicated emotions. I did what was necessary to protect my son. You did more than that, Evelyn insisted. You rebuilt yourself from the ground up. That takes extraordinary courage. Another silence fell, less tense than before, but still heavy with unresolved feelings. I should go, Cordelia said finally, rising from the chair. I need to get back to Theo. Of course, Evelyn nodded, disappointment evident in her expression despite her attempt to hide it. Thank you for coming. It means more than you know. At the door, Cordelia paused, turning back. I'll send you photos of Theo, she said, the decision forming even as she spoke it. Not now, not yet. But when I'm ready, you should know your grandson, even if only from a distance. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Cordelia agreed honestly. It is. But Theo deserves to know his heritage, complicated as it may be. When he's older, if you're still here, we'll revisit the possibility of supervised contact. I make no promises beyond that. I understand, Evelyn said, composing herself with visible effort. On your terms, in your time. That's more hope than I had yesterday. As Cordelia drove back to Port Townsend, she felt a strange lightness, not the relief of reconciliation or the release of forgiveness, but the unburdening that comes with confronting a painful truth and surviving it. She had faced her mother, heard the full story of the betrayal, and walked away intact, neither destroyed by renewed anger nor manipulated into premature forgiveness. It was another step in the ongoing journey of rebuilding her life, her identity, her capacity for trust. A journey that had brought her unexpected gifts alongside the painful losses, a son she adored, a community that had embraced her, professional opportunities that honored her talents, and a relationship with Bennett that promised the kind of genuine partnership she had once thought impossible. When she arrived home, she found Bennett waiting on her porch, a gentle smile of welcome on his face. Without words, he opened his arms, and Cordelia stepped into his embrace, accepting the comfort he offered without reservation. How did it go? He asked softly against her hair. Better than I feared, harder than I hoped, she replied honestly. But necessary. Another piece of the past addressed, so I can focus more fully on the future. Our future? Bennett asked, the question carrying weight beyond the simple words. Cordelia looked up at him, seeing all the qualities she had come to value so deeply, his steadiness, his compassion, his respect for her independence alongside his desire for connection. Yes, she confirmed. Our future, if that's what you want. It's all I want, he assured her, his kiss a promise more binding than any legal document or formal commitment. Later that evening, after Reed had returned Theo from his visitation, Cordelia sat in the rocking chair beside the nursery window, her son sleeping peacefully against her chest. Outside, the first snow of winter dusted the pines surrounding their cabin, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and beautiful. Like her life, Cordelia reflected, transformed by circumstances she hadn't chosen, reshaping pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, ending into beginning. The journey hadn't been what she'd expected or planned, but the destination was proving richer, more authentic than the carefully controlled existence she'd once believed was happiness. We're going to be okay, Theo, she whispered to her sleeping son, the words both blessing and prophecy. Better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary. When the two people who should love you most commit the ultimate betrayal, where do you turn? For Cordelia, the answer wasn't in revenge or bitterness, but in the courage to rebuild, to create something authentic from the ashes of what was lost. If her story resonated with you, remember that sometimes life's most painful chapters are simply preparing you for a more beautiful story than you ever imagined possible. Subscribe for more tales of resilience, transformation, and the strength that comes from surviving what once seemed unsurvivable.